Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome on board. Let's learn to fly the Boeing 787 in the Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020. I'll quickly take you through the cockpit and the required few key bindings that will help ease out the flying part. It's not a need-to-know knowledge, just a good-to-know knowledge. You can skip it if you want. But before we start, just be advised that this is a work-in-progress airplane and a lot of things don't work, but it's flyable, it's fun, and we'll try to keep things as close to the real life as possible. So, starting with the cockpit tour, that's the overhead panel, and its layout is generic and similar across the Boeing fleet. Starting from the left, that's electric panel, hydraulics panel, fuel panel, air conditioning and pressurization, seatbelt signs and lighting panel. This one's here that's called the glare shield. 787 has 5 huge displays called the multifunction displays or MFDs. The left 2 MFDs along with those 2 switches are called left forward panel, and similarly on the opposite side it's called a right forward panel. That small instrument is called the ISFD, Integrated Standby Flight Display. I've done a video on it and about its importance. So ISFD along with the landing gear lever and auto brake switch is called the center forward panel. Lower MFD along with the FMC keypad is forward aisle stand, and this whole setting here, the thrust levers along with speed brake lever, flap lever, track pads, parking brake lever, stab trim cutout switches, and the alternate flap switch is called the control stand. And this whole thing is the aft aisle stand which has TCP, ACP and the fire switch for each engines. TCP is the tuning and control panel, ACP is audio control panel, fire handles are over there, and that's the transponder, the TCAS panel. That's the left sidewall, which includes the oxygen mask, the electronic flight bag, which is inoperable in the simulator, the tiller for nose wheel steering, and the heaters and lighting control switches. Similarly, on the opposite side is the right sidewall. And that's just about the nomenclature of the 787 cockpit. Okay, now let's take a look at the suggested key bindings that is required to fly in any airliner. So, escape control, starting with the access switches. Oh, by the way, I'm using the Logitech G940 HOTAS along with the rudder pedals. That's something that was gifted to me by one of my senior colleagues, Captain Mukund Thorat. The most common access, the ailerons, left and right stick, the elevator, up and down, and then on the stick, I've put in 3 key bindings that I think is required. The one is the autopilot disengage switch, so that while you're flying, you can disconnect the autopilot with just a click. And then I've put in the elevator trim, nose up and nose down. And we've got 2 switches for that. So the upper button is for nose down, the lower button is for nose up. Why do I use it that way? Well, if you fly the airliners, you'll understand. And even the real one, if you see this switch right here, this is the elevator trim switch. When you put it down, it gives us nose up. When you put it up, it gives us nose down. So it's the opposite way, and this is how I use it in my joystick as well. And then moving on to the pedals. You got the left, right rudders, left brake, right brake, toe brakes. Simple, nothing special about it. And on the thrust levers, by the way, I've got 2 thrust levers. The G940 has one for the left engine, one for the right engine. Dual thrust levers is really helpful if you want to taxi the 787 and the 747 well. The rudders and the brakings are not pretty efficient if you want to do a tight turns. So this differential thrust levers helps a lot. 2 switches I think really important is one of them is the auto throttle disconnect switch and the auto throttle toga switch, which in my case it doesn't work most of the time. I don't know, maybe some issue with my system, my thrust lever, or maybe the simulator itself. I've got a switch for parking brake here, a switch for spoilers, gear up and gear down, and yes, the most important, the toggle throttle reverse thrust. How it works, I'll just explain. If you look at the thrust levers, thrust forward, thrust idle, left thrust, right thrust. toggle reverse thrust. If I click this button and then I put thrust up, so this is a reverse thrust. Hit the button again, back to normal thrust. One switch for speed brakes, and then switches for flaps. So this is the basic thing that's required to fly. I mean, this is kind of a setup that's helpful for all the airliners in the Microsoft Flight Simulator. So that's just about it for this one. In the next, we'll do a cold and dark setup and try to do it as close to the real life as possible. So I'll catch you soon in the next one. Ciao.